Thanks to everyone who's joining. We're going to give it just a couple minutes for everybody to tune in, and we'll get started in just a little bit. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining this special discussion here on Earth Week. First of all, happy Earth Week. As you probably know, April 22nd every year is Earth Day, and it's an opportunity for us to lift up all that we're collectively doing to protect the planet and the challenges that we face. It's also an opportunity to lift up leaders and sometimes under-recognized leaders who are driving change, protecting the environment, but then also people. And so today we're going to be in conversation with young leaders from across the state that are manifesting that leadership in different ways. I'm really excited to introduce you to them. I do want to share that this week we have a couple of other events happening. If you happen to be in Sacramento or around Sacramento, tomorrow on Thursday from 3 to 5 p.m., we're opening up our agency headquarters and having a family-friendly open house. It's really geared towards kids and young people. We will be screening some great environmental short films that are on loan from this remarkable film festival called the Wild and Scenic Film Festival. We have an awesome new auditorium. So we're going to have films in the auditorium between 3 and 5. And then we have all of these departments across our agencies, whether it's state parks and fish and wildlife, water resources. They're going to be having different booths with demonstrations and games. We're going to also have on display zero-emission vehicles and even a fire truck outside, and share a pretty important milestone on clean transportation. So that's happening from 3 to 5 in Sacramento at our headquarters at 715 P Street or P and 8th Street. You can just Google the Natural Resources headquarters. That's an exciting event. And then on Friday at 4:30 p.m., this Friday, we're going to be screening a documentary called Watershed, California Watersheds, Healing. And it's all focused on what we need to do to protect our watersheds and all the nature that they represent, both to reduce wildfire risk, but then also for our water. And that is going to start at 4:30. We're going to show the movie, which is just over an hour, I think. And then we're going to have a panel discussion with some leaders and experts on water and watersheds from across the state. So once again, happy Earth Week. Wherever you are in the state, please do try to plug into local events. There's great environmental events happening across the state. Me and my family are joining a river cleanup, for example, on Saturday, and I'm sure there's activities where you are. Today, we're going to be in conversation with 5 young leaders that are driving environmental change in very different ways in different parts of the state. We'll have an opportunity to meet each of them and then bring them all together in conversation. We want you to participate in the discussion by sharing any questions or comments that you have in the Q&A function, which is on the bottom of your screen. At any point in the conversation, if you want to ask a question or give a shout out to any of our participants, please do in that Q&A. And then I'm going to be integrating that into the conversation. Also, my colleague Geeta, who is responsible for pulling this together. So huge thanks, Geeta. Geeta is going to be providing information in the chat function of our Zoom panel here today. So information on the organizations that we talk about and on the young leaders that we're talking to here today. If you have suggestions on other topics that you want to have a big public dialogue on like this, please let us know. And you can put that in the Q&A and we will consider all input that we're getting. So let's get underway. You know, when we think about environmental change, whether it's the creation of Earth Day or the recent climate strike across the world or the fight for environmental justice, it's young people that have driven this change. And oftentimes it's young leaders that catalyze these changes, but don't fully get the credit. The policy conversations that we have in Sacramento or Washington, D.C. tend to trend, old, basically. I'll say that as a middle-aged person. We don't have enough space for young voices, young leaders to talk about what they need to see in our world. So today it's an opportunity to feature again those young leaders across the state that are just emblematic of probably thousands or tens of thousands of young people across California in the United States that are taking action on climate change, driving equity and environmental justice, and protecting our natural environment. So let's get underway. I want to first introduce Sabrina Robles. Sabrina works at the California Conservation Corps, and she has promoted to a role as a crew leader. Right now, Sabrina, you are a crew leader participating, working on backcountry work. I think last summer you participated in a backcountry program, and you're one of 1,300 women and men across the state, typically 19 to 23, 24 years old, that are on the front lines, battling wildfires, flood this winter, improving energy efficiency, and Conservation Corps members hail from across the state. And as we've talked about, we really view Corps members like yourself as future leaders, hopefully sitting in chairs like the one I sit in someday. So excited to have you here and want to talk a little bit about the work that you do. But Sabrina, first, just tell us a little bit more about where you come from in California, and then how you got involved in the Conservation Corps.
Yeah, that sounds good. Well, hi, everyone. My name is Sabrina Robles. I am a 25-year-old crew leader here at the California Conservation Corps, and I am from Fresno, California. It's actually quite interesting how I got into the seas. I was working a desk job in Madera, and I soon found out that I'm not an indoor person. And I found the California Conservation Corps on Indeed.com, surprisingly.
Wow.
Everybody else that I asked, they heard it word of mouth, but I found mine on Indeed, and I called. Sergio, our navigator, picked up, and we talked a bit, and I was able to get into comment, and from then I've been in since July of 2021.
So talk a little bit about the last few years in the Conservation Corps, and frankly, why you're still there and moving up the chain.
Well, my intent to join the Corps was to get into backcountry, which is very special to me. So I'm from the Kings Canyon backcountry. So where you spend about 6 months in the backcountry with a team of about 15 to 20 people. And then you spend time in the backcountry. You can't go home. You don't have any phones. And then you do work in the backcountry. So you do rock work, you do trail maintenance, and then you help restore meadows. And one of our special projects was to finish up Doozy Basin in Kings Canyon, where we rerouted a trail out of a meadow. And that's very important because we want to reserve the meadow. We want to conserve the meadow. We don't want, people or animals or whatever that could be going through the trail to mess up the meadow. So we just want to reroute people, in that way.
Wow. And growing up, did you spend a lot of time in the backcountry? I mean, what was your experience in Fresno with nature, and why do you think you're drawn to it?
Yeah, growing up, I actually wasn't raised in the backcountry, but I do know that I was raised outside. That's what I like to tell people. I always played outside since I was a kid, and I think it just kind of came out when I got older, and I'm like, okay, this is for me. Like, I love being outside. This is what I like to do. And just kind of going through the Corps, backcountry was a big thing for me, but we do more than backcountry as well. We do fuel reduction. So that helps with the crowding of like the forest. We do invasive species removal, which helps prevent drought. But yeah,
Wow.
I love it here. Yeah.
And I talk about you guys on the front lines. People like me are doing a lot of talking and involved in policy discussions in government. You guys are actually doing all this environmental restoration and protection work. Can you talk a little bit about your colleagues at the Corps, where they're coming from, and also the leadership development that now you're involved in as a crew leader?
Oh yeah. Everybody here, they come from different walks of life. It's just so diverse here. And I think this is somewhere where I fit in, because growing up here in Fresno, especially, it's a melting pot. So everybody that comes through the doors of the seas, everybody's just so diverse. And I feel like I just feel at home, I fit in. And then everybody actually kind of finds a liking in what we do here. At first, it's, wow, this is just so much, because it's very different from having a regular 9-to-5 job. if you will.
Yeah.
Here you handle chainsaws, you're handling McLeods and Pulaskis, and you're learning to dig line and we even have like salmon restoration at a very young age. The program runs from like 18-year-olds to 25-year-olds, and it's very different once you start in the Corps at a very young age, and you learn your world is open to so many opportunities here at the Corps. It's awesome.
That's amazing. So looking ahead, adults often ask this question, and obviously you're an adult at this point, but what do you see yourself doing in the future? Like, do you see this as an entree to a career in this work? If you had a magic wand, what would you be doing in 10, 20 years?
Oh, most definitely. I would really like to get into environmental justice, which is what I'm actually doing now. My hopes are to get into UC Berkeley in the next 4 years, pursue a master's in environmental justice, and just really help where I'm at. I understand it takes a while to change the world, but if I kind of do it one small thing at a time, I think we can eventually get there. And that's kind of my goal.
Wow, that's incredible. And I know that having that experience of the seas is going to really benefit you as you apply to Berkeley and the UCs. And do you envision yourself, going back to Fresno and working on EJ issues, or where do you think you'll plug in across California?
Yes, most definitely. I love Fresno. I love being from California. This is my home, and I would like to do as much as I can to help it. That's just my goal. But also, if I feel like Fresno has been fulfilled by me, then I want to travel to other places, which is what I'm doing right now with the Blue Water Exchange program. So we take 5 people.
Talk about that.
Yeah. So it's 5 people from California and then 5 people from Hawaii. And then we actually immerse together, and then we actually work with the native tribes that happen here in California and in Hawaii. So actually in June coming up, we're working with the native tribes up in Arcata, and then we're going to Tahoe, and then we'll be going to Hawaii. Yeah, and it's going to be really, really great.
Incredible. I mean, great leadership development too. And is that a new program?
I believe they've been around for a few years. Excuse me, I forgot how many years, but I know they've been around for a while. But that is their main focus, to basically immerse ourselves into Native culture, and to teach us and understand why protecting land is so important, and to keep these practices going.
Wow, that's incredible. We're on such a journey across the state and in state government to learn from our Native leaders and communities. They've been stewarding our lands and waters for tens of thousands of years, right? And I'll speak for state government. We've disconnected ourselves from that wisdom. So it's so cool that as young leaders, you're actually embedding with that expertise and that wisdom. It's going to be really remarkable for you in your career, I imagine.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, Sabrina, we're going to bring you back in as a group conversation, but I want to turn to our next leader, and that is Ben Grundy. Ben works for Environment California, and we've met in a couple of, at this point, Ben, a few different occasions where you've been advocating on behalf of ocean protection. So while Sabrina's out there, breaking trail in the backcountry, you're breaking ground in the state capitol as an advocate. And so talk to me a little bit. I want to ask you about your work in Environment California and what your priorities are in the work. But first, just tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, kind of why you're drawn to this work, and then ultimately how you found the job that you have now.
Yeah, definitely. Those are all great questions. So for as long as I can remember, I've been interested in environmental issues. As a second grader, I remember running around and telling people I wanted to be a geologist when I grew up. I grew up in Los Angeles, California. Definitely not the first place in California you think of when you hear beautiful landscapes and nature. But what I did have was being able to go on walks in local parks and go to the beach with my family. So that was sort of my first connection with nature, and sparked my passion for being able to be involved in a space where I can work on protecting these beautiful natural spaces. And over time, my interest grew beyond just geology, and I decided that I wanted to major in environmental science and sort of take a deeper dive into the sciences. And while at Santa Clara University, I also took a political science course. There was always a part of me that was interested in civic engagement and in government. So I took a class and was, I'd like to say, politely coerced by someone in the department to add on a political science major. So I've always had this interest and passion for being able to get people involved and take action. And thankfully, when I started looking for opportunities, I wasn't sure exactly what I was wanting to do. I wasn't sure if it was in the science route, in a lab, if it was working in a legislative office. I just knew I wanted to be able to be in a position to make a difference and make some lasting change in California. And thankfully, I got a call from my current boss, Laura Dean, over at Environment California, and she provided me with an opportunity to get involved in grassroots advocacy. And I've enjoyed every second of being able to engage communities on environmental actions.
Wow. Well, talk a little bit about what grassroots advocacy is. We hear those terms, but I think a lot of people might not know exactly what sort of the day in and day out of a job like yours actually is.
Yeah, so grassroots advocacy can look like a lot of different things. I feel it boils down to just getting the everyday person, the student, getting the worker, just involved in advocacy and in activism. Oftentimes, these things can be intimidating and seem like a far off thing that you can't really get involved in. Everyone has their own opinions on how government works, but being able to truly connect people to their political process and show them that their voice matters and it deserves to be heard. So a lot of the work I do is sort of public outreach and public engagement, making sure that people are aware of specific environmental issues. So as you mentioned, a lot of my time has been focused on marine protected areas and protecting our oceans. So making sure that the public understands what a protected ocean looks like and opportunities to protect our ocean. So getting people engaged in press conferences and rallies and just providing people with opportunities to engage with their officials in a productive manner.
Wow. Well, I want to give you a platform for a moment to talk about your current campaign. You know, I have so much respect for Environment California, which is part of a network of grassroots organizations across the states. And you really bring people power to these conversations in Sacramento. So I've seen, you and your colleagues organize a ton of people around priorities on the environment. So talk a little bit about, I think you're advocating right now, ultimately for the expansion of what are called marine protected areas. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so right now I'm working on our Protect Our Oceans campaign. I'm sure many people in California are familiar with our beautiful ocean and coastal landscapes, but a lot of the value of our ocean and marine environments expand just beyond the aesthetics and beauty. Our oceans are responsible for serving as carbon sinks and protecting our planet from warming. But they're also habitats for, I believe, 34 marine species and over 180 different seabirds and marine birds. So they really play a critical role in protecting and maintaining a healthy ecosystem. Unfortunately, we've seen over the years that our oceans are experiencing hardships, things caused by climate change. So we saw that marine heat wave in 2014 and 2016, which affected coastal ecosystems. But we're also seeing the impacts that humans are having on our ocean, whether that's consequences of oil drilling and oil spills, or just the plastic pollution that's entering our environment, or fishing gear and impacts from fishing. So we're seeing a lot of the impacts that our ocean is experiencing. And thankfully, California really does have an opportunity to protect our biodiversity for the future. Right now, California already has a strong network of 124 marine protected areas that's globally celebrated and globally recognized. So to be a part of a state that's already doing so much is an honor personally. So I sort of see my role as continuing to politely coerce some of our officials to take the next step. We put an initial down payment on protecting our oceans with the first 124. And I really think to make sure that we're building a climate resilient ocean and making sure that we're continuing to protect our biodiversity, we have an opportunity to do so much more. So that's why I believe that strengthening and expanding this already strong network is one of the best things we can do for protecting our ocean.
Wow. Well, I've been super impressed with your advocacy, and I'd like to politely coerce you into government eventually. And that is really one of the things we can talk about a little bit later, is that, in these careers, there's, I started off working, interning at a nonprofit organization, and then outside of government and inside of government. So there's a lot of opportunities that you and the others will talk to have basically by building such a strong early career of environmental leadership. So more on that in a little bit. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you.
I next want to introduce Ruben Rosas. And Ruben and I had an opportunity to meet just a few weeks ago, where I spent some time with him and his family, who are active in two really important groups that are driving a movement for equitable outdoor access and nature protection. One is called the Hispanic Access Foundation, and the other is Por la Creación, which is a network of faith leaders driving on these priorities. So Ruben, it's great to see you. I loved your energy. We had great conversation when we saw each other down in Southern California. Talk a little bit about, where you're from, how you got into this work. I think you're just finishing high school here. You're in high school. You're doing a lot. So just tell us a little bit about how you came to what you're doing now.
So again, well, hello, my name is Ruben Rosas, and I am a high school senior here at San Jacinto Valley Academy. And I'm also doing dual enrollment at MSJC, and I'm taking an environmental science class.
And MSJC is actually like a college. So you're in high school and college at the same time.
Yes, I'm doing both at the same time, yeah. And then what we do at Hispanic Access, we create access for lower income communities. So what we do, we create programs. Just about a month ago, we took a group out hiking, and then we took them on a boat, sightseeing, looking at a bunch of animals, and just getting them out there.
That's incredible. And why is that important? I think maybe not everybody understands that there are some Californians that don't normally have access to those places or don't feel welcome in those places. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. Just even as when I was growing up too, I was fortunate by my parents, by them taking me out to the mountains and taking me out to the beach. But there's a lot of kids that live in lower income communities, especially as their parents working as the factories or even working out in the fields. They don't really have enough money for them to take them out to the ocean or take them out to the mountains, or they don't have enough access for them so they could even go into those kind of spaces. So that's why I think it's important that we even create these programs to let them out and experiences as everyone else as well.
Absolutely. And I've been impressed talking to you that you're really taking advantage of all these opportunities that come your way. And I think since I saw you, you actually traveled to Costa Rica with a group of students. Maybe just talk a little bit about that, but also talk about how you're able to, find and take advantage of these opportunities. I mean, remarkable that you're in high school and college together. Like what drives you?
Yeah, even just being in Costa Rica was just amazing. Just the food was amazing, just being out there. But the main reason we went out there was to visit an elementary school right in the middle of the jungle. So they don't have anything. Their parents work in the coffee plantations. They're dirt poor. So we came out there, we gave them little supplies and helped them. And even just seeing that, yes, they're also poor, but there's a lot of communities, even in LA, that are in this similar situation. And I just feel like a thing that drives me too is just to really help these people. Like I said, I've been fortunate to be raised in a place like this, but most people don't have what I have. And I want to help them get those resources to help them better their own lives.
That's incredible. So as you look at your future, what do you want to be doing in 10 years, 20 years?
Well, in the future, I want to start a couple businesses, but also I want to start my own nonprofit, working with kids, maybe like even going to the high schools, help them, give them those resources, or even help them financially, even help find ways to get them scholarships to go to different colleges to really help them out.
I'm so excited. And I think you're getting a lot. I mean, all of the panelists have gotten hearts and thumbs up, these emoticons that are coming from folks that are tuning in. It's really energizing and inspiring to see you and the others leaning forward as you are. It's incredible. There's a lot to be discouraged about and huge challenges, including accelerating climate change. But hearing, your leadership, the others' leadership, I think gives us hope, which helps us continue to take action. So huge thanks, Ruben, for what you're doing, and we'll connect you in here. Next, I want to introduce Sydney Chan. And Sydney wears many hats, actually. Youth for Climate intern, Eco Club coalition leader, high school student as well. When we had a chance to connect before today, I was amazed with all that you're driving forward. So Sydney, talk a little bit about, yourself, where you live, and all these different organizations that you're involved in.
Yeah, hi. My name is Sydney. I'm from San Diego, California, and I'm involved with various organizations in the youth division of San Diego 350. So, Youth for Climate, which kind of works to empower students to take action through like advocacy and other educational programs. I'm the lead of the Eco Club Coalition, and that's really cool because we're connecting clubs throughout San Diego. It's really nice to meet people from all throughout the county and connect with those student leaders, and also a member, as you mentioned, of Youth Beat Oil, which is an organization working for a just transition to clean energy through the phasing out of oil drilling in California. And yeah, very inspired by everyone I've met throughout these, groups.
Wow. So what drives you? You are not the normal high school student in terms of your leadership and your advocacy. What got you engaged?
Yeah, that's a great point. It's kind of funny because it was a fellow classmate of mine who told me about these opportunities or these organizations and invited me to join. So I'm lucky to have to have had a connection to a peer who was so knowledgeable about the climate crisis, and that's kind of why I aspire to do the same throughout high schools in my area. So yeah.
Wow. And what in these different organizations that you're in, speaking for your peers, what do you see as some of the most pressing issues we face?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a lot of the times we're kind of looking at the climate crisis as this unsolvable problem, or it seems a bit hopeless at times, just knowing that we've been growing up with this kind of looming over our heads. So I think it's, really great to be able to give students who might have thought that they don't, have a role in this fight, like a place to kind of express, first of all, their frustration, but also give them an avenue to act and, different things that they can become a part of and find, ways to find their place in the movement.
Wow. And then you feel like you guys are able to make a difference in the San Diego community, and how has that been like interacting, trying to drive forward, whether it's, against neighborhood oil drilling or for more climate action?
Yeah, I think we've definitely been able to see our impacts kind of spread throughout, like, San Diego. We passed a resolution through Youth Beat Oil that passed through various boards throughout San Diego as well as California, including the San Diego City Council and various student boards in some of the UC schools. So that was really great. We've also just organized like local rallies and seen support from, just people walking by and things like that. And it's very empowering to know that people are there to kind of help us with this fight and things like that.
Yeah. And I'll say, I think, youth have such moral authority because, as you get older, at least for myself, what we realize is, we're leaving this environment to the younger generation. And I know when, young people have been outspoken that we need to move further and faster, that strikes a chord. So Sydney, huge thanks for taking time in, busy life of a teenager going to high school to step up and be a leader and hold us to account for doing more. So I want to talk a little bit more about that. But let me ask you, what's your thoughts for after high school? Is this something you see yourself doing? Fine if it's not, but just interested in your thoughts from here.
Yeah, so I hope to major in either environmental policy or environmental studies after high school, or sociology. I haven't quite decided yet, but I definitely want to still be involved in this work. I'm not entirely sure if I'm planning to stay in California, but I think that would be really nice just knowing, what I know about California and the climate movement. I'm not entirely sure, but I have many, many things that I would love to do in the future.
Totally. I always found that my 20s were a time where I could experiment with a bunch of different things that I wanted to be working on. And it goes without saying, there's great work in California, but there's plenty of environmental challenges to solve beyond California as well. So look forward to talking a little bit more in just a bit. Our last panelist is Ashley Haven. And Ashley is a youth intern at Comité Cívico de Valle, which is a remarkable community-based organization in Imperial County, California. And Ashley, you are part of an environmental health internship. I think it's a partnership with an entity called Tracking California and funded by the National Institute of Health. And I think a lot of folks joining today may not, know a lot about Imperial County and why environmental health is such a big deal there. So interested for you to first introduce yourself and like the community you come from, talk a little bit about how you got in the work, and then talk about the work in Imperial County.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a high school junior right now. So I know there's not a lot of youth that here, especially in Imperial Valley, who are interested in environmental science. I was really surprised at the kind of lack of not interest, but just knowledge and opportunities for youth here. So I'm really thankful to Comite for reaching out to the youth. I know there was an Assembly Bill 617, which encouraged like disadvantaged communities throughout California to establish like training programs that inform local communities about specifically air pollution and other environmental concerns that exist here. So really through Comite's outreach, I wouldn't have been able to have so many great experiences. For example, we went to Washington, D.C. just 2 months ago, and we were able to meet with local lawmakers. So our Congressman Raul Ruiz, where we really got to speak to him one-on-one and tell him firsthand about our experience growing up in Imperial Valley, because there are a slew of environmental concerns that exist here. Like, for example, just the air pollution, our air quality doesn't quite meet federal standards. Salton Sea, of course, when we need to establish restoration projects, which that goes along with lithium extraction. I know the governor implemented a new lithium extraction tax, and that money gets redistributed to our local communities. So there's just a lot of work to be done, especially since our county's economy is really built and founded around agriculture. So that's something that's really important to us.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, your voice and the voice of young people, but also community members is really, really important. I've spent a lot of the last 4 years focused on trying to stabilize the Salton Sea, and it was organizations like Comité Cívico de Valle who really made sure that central to this conversation are the communities impacted, by air pollution, in part created by an unhealthy sea. So, you're stepping up and spending the time on this and going and educating your congressman, who himself knows a lot about this as an emergency room doctor from that part of California, but it's just really, really valuable. I'm interested in the interaction you've had with other interns on these topics. Do you guys, do you share the same sort of pathway that brought you here? Like what got you involved or what got you interested in doing this kind of work?
Yeah, so there were numerous there were like workshops that were held at our local community college. And so my experience was kind of unique because other students had come to the college to come for this workshop and they signed up from there. But I was doing research like independently about the Imperial Valley. I think my interest was piqued since the pandemic because I previously had not really known about these concerns that exist in the Imperial Valley specifically, because I always grew up here and I always just thought, we're like any other county in California. But it was really concerning to me that our COVID-19, like our number of cases and deaths per 100,000 people is the highest of any California county. And so just statistics like that were really alarming. And so that really brought me into the field of environmental science. When I was doing research, just Googling things like this. And so I came across a few nonprofits such as Comité Cívico, and they were reaching out to young people, which I was so grateful for, like an experience, because I had never really had an experience where youth were the ones who were being reached out to. So that was really the beginnings of my interest in environmental science. Our program is about 10 students, high school students, who come together with their common interest of making an impact specifically in our valley. And we were just really, really excited to be at Washington, D.C., since a lot of us hadn't been out of state before. And so it was just really a unique experience being able to speak to these important people about the subjects that we care about.
Yeah, what was your take in terms of being in those congressional offices, and particularly since none of you had done it before?
Yeah, it was really exciting for me, especially because when I go to university, I plan on pursuing a career or an education in the field of public policy and government. So when I was there, it was just really incredible knowing that I have the power to make a change and tell these people like so many miles away about what's happening in our tiny little valley, and being able to know that there are lawmakers who care about our problems and are working to create a better future for us.
Wow, and to be able to have that experience as a high school student is incredible. And thank you, by the way, for taking some time out of your day for this discussion.
Oh yeah.
You know, one thing I'll just be honest that we learned, I mean, and this is just being candid, is we're having a conversation with many of you are high school students, and we're doing it in the middle of the day during school. So recognizing that, you know, as we find ways to increase the voice, strengthen the voice of young people, and it's also finding times that work. So thanks for accommodating us.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah. So let's bring in everyone to the conversation. And again, a reminder to those who are tuning in here, if you have questions or comments, please put that in the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We've got already some good ones, including a lot of positive feedback. I think I probably speak for a lot of people watching today when I can tell you this is the exact thing that we need on Earth Week to actually get us fired up to continue to do the work that a lot of us do. Sean asked a question about what level of interest do your peers, and that can include for those of you who are in school, or Ben and Sabrina, you know, you're in your mid-20s. What interest do your peers show around ideas of environmental science, justice, advocacy? Like, are you guys outliers? Are you seeing this as resonant across your age group? So anyone can jump in here.
Yeah, I can go first, if that's
Please.
okay. Yeah, so when we head out to the grade, which is where we'll go for the day for our projects to start, we'll have mini classes that happen during like our breaks. Some of our people are very well educated in knowing like what kind of trees these are, what kind of plants these are. And it's very exciting to see everybody ask questions and get really interested when someone's like, oh, this is what this is. Because like I said, how I mentioned earlier, a lot of us come from different walks of life, but we all don't know each other quite yet until we start asking questions. And like one of my colleagues mentioned before, it's interesting to see just like a lack of knowledge. But once you start to talk about it and have a conversation about it, that's when people start to like realize like, okay, like this is out there. This is something I can do, and I really like this. And it's really nice to see that growth.
Wow. And have you been able to do that with your friends or family members in Fresno that aren't already in the Cs, that you try to get them more engaged in these topics that you care about?
Yeah, I do it quite a bit, especially on the grade. I take a lot of information that I learned from backcountry back here at the center. I talk about it with my peers all the time. After I get off my conversation calls with Blue Water Exchange Program, where we learn about the tribes, I end up venting to my sister. I'm like, oh, this is what we just talked about. Like I learned something new, and it makes you feel, I just feel really fulfilled, just knowing more information, like what we can do to help like better this world.
That's amazing. How about others? Level of engagement or interest from your friends or your co-students or folks outside of your jobs?
I can add on to that. I think that especially in this digital age, there is more awareness about especially the subject of climate change. So when you can easily repost something on your story and you have access to more information online, it becomes like a social movement kind of. So I think there's a lot of people who are more concerned about it, but I agree with Sydney when she says that there's a general feeling of kind of hopelessness where I'm a young person, and especially it depends where you live. I think in more urban areas, there's more there's like protests out on the street about it, and especially in areas where like lawmakers are, like Sacramento, more young people are interested in making a change. But somewhere where I am, I think there's like a lack of knowledge, and I think there should be more outreach from local programs that teach us about the environmental issues that are affecting us. So like, for example, I was talking about the Salton Sea with one of my classmates. And so I was talking about the Salton Sea, and halfway through my conversation, he looks at me and he's like, wait, we're talking about the lake in Utah, right? And so I'm like, no, the Salton Sea is like right next to us. And so I realized that a lot of people don't, like students especially, don't have the time to be researching these subjects and don't even know about what's going on in our communities. So I think that's something that we should really tackle.
Absolutely. I got a great follow-up question. I don't want to cut anybody off, but my former colleague, Mark Borges, who himself is a young leader who came through the Capital Fellows program, asked a really good question, which is, to your point, Ashley, how and where are young people hearing about environmental issues? How can organizations, whether it's government or nonprofits, better communicate to young people and young leaders about environmental issues? So how do we best engage, in your case, for example, high school students, to really share that information and get people, more active?
Yeah, so this is something that we talked about at our experience with Comite. We did a tobacco collection project where we collected tobacco waste in school zones and residential areas in the city of Calexico. And what we did was we took a tally of the amount of vape and cigarette butts and other tobacco related products. And so when we had this information on hand, it was like, how do we raise awareness about this now? So what we did was we created infographics, like digital ones, that not only could be posted physically, like printed out, but also posted online, because I think nowadays, kids are glued to their phones, and I think it's that whole kind of social media experience where you get to repost something on your story, which that's your story, that's what you care about, and it kind of builds on who you are. So when people repost that on their story, I know there's people who do that to seem cool and up with what's going on in the world, but genuinely, I think that there's been such an emphasis on climate change in particular in recent years because of social media.
That's super helpful. And I can say this as a middle-aged person, when you say posting their story, is that on a particular platform?
Yeah, so I think this exists on other platforms, but it's mostly like Instagram or Facebook, because that's what most young people use nowadays.
Got it. Others on, what's the level of awareness or engagement, but then also how can, all of us do a better job building awareness engagement?
Yeah, I could kind of speak on this. I think making or kind of framing getting involved in environmental work in an easy to understand way for youth is really helpful, because it's like, I guess a lot of high schoolers might be like, well, I'm not a politician, I can't make a big difference, but you don't really have to have a huge platform or a huge amount of influence to start, doing things that you care about and making an impact that way. And I've also seen that sometimes it can be kind of like a chain reaction, where if you get involved, one of your friends might be like, oh, what's this you're doing? Like, I'm interested in that too. And that can really start, within schools and things like that.
Well, in Sydney, you guys are doing a lot of stuff probably locally in San Diego, right? So people can see kind of how they can take action and make change versus some big global discussion about climate change.
Yeah, so a lot of what we do is in San Diego. So yeah, it's easier to definitely I guess give people kind of opportunities to get involved. It can be like, oh, you can come to this rally that we're having this weekend, or this certain event, and things like that. So yeah, just kind of manageable or easy to understand opportunities that can help someone I guess start out, and then from there you can kind of expand your climate action and things like that.
Yeah. Ben, Ruben, thoughts? What is the level of engagement among young people, and how do we collectively increase it?
Yeah, so I feel like I'm sort of a bridge between different groups, but I'm 23, so just out of college. But I think I would echo everything that Ashley, Sabrina, and Sydney have said so far. I think there is a general education and understanding of climate change and environmental issues affecting communities. I think growing up in this time, you're just presented so much information that you have a general understanding. I think the best opportunity, and hearing from Ashley and Sydney, it sort of told me like, like I need to get really good at my job to engage young people so they feel they are connected to opportunities. But I think it's really important to have education tied with engagement opportunities. It's great to have the pamphlets and have the petitions, but if there's not a level of follow-up or opportunities to get young people involved, whether it's attending a beach cleanup or inviting people to participate in public forums or lobby meetings, sort of making those connections, then you start building confidence and people can find their own voices while navigating this space. So I think a key thing to engage youth is not just doing the initial outreach with education information, but then sort of doing the follow-up work and giving meaningful opportunities to really engage on these issues.
Yeah, and Ben, grassroots organizing is all about getting people, to actually, move beyond, oh, interesting, I agree with you, to take action. So is there any secret sauce in finding that, young person to come testify at a hearing, or what would you say?
I don't know if there's a secret sauce. If there is, I haven't found it just yet. I think it's just recognizing that, I think Ashley mentioned earlier, but change takes time. It's not something that happens overnight. And generally, people are passionate about having clean water, having clean air, having access to open spaces. So if you can find those commonalities and really make these issues personal to the individual, everyone might not know the bill number or the hearing process or the movement of bills throughout the legislature, but they understand wanting access to good, clean public parks. They understand wanting to be able to go to a beach and not see a bunch of plastic pollution. So just really making sure that there is a personal tie-in to the people you're engaging with might be a piece of the secret sauce or an ingredient of the secret sauce. So really just making sure that there's some level of buy-in from individuals, and then again, providing them with the space to act.
Yeah, absolutely. Ruben, thoughts? You talked about, folks from lower income communities that didn't have access. And we've seen a real movement through organizations that you're involved in with giving voice to those folks to say, hey, it's our, we deserve public spaces. We deserve connections to that public space. What's your experience, with you and your family in terms of trying to get people involved in that?
Well, this last year, I gathered up a lot of people from my youth group, and we went out to Huntington Beach, and then we ended up getting bags, clean up a bunch of the trash. And during that same day, Hispanic Access gave out a grant to a lot of different youth groups, a lot of different organizations, and a lot of people were doing a lot of cleanups in the mountains. They were doing cleanups everywhere. So, and yeah.
And what do you think what's the difference between somebody who decides to come along to that versus somebody that says, no, I'd, rather stay home?
Well, I just feel like a lot of, especially Latinos, a lot of us really care about our environment. We really care about a lot of things that are going around us. We like to stay in a clean area. So I feel like a lot of us are trying to create a lot of action so we have those clean spaces.
Wow. I want to ask a question to Ben and Sabrina, because you all are early career professionals in organizations with much older people. So how do you kind of find your voice and exercise leadership, as young leaders in organizations that are led by older people? And have you had challenges, or how do you navigate that? Is age an issue? How do you approach being a young leader in a large organization? Maybe Sabrina first and then Ben.
Okay, yeah. Well, how I go about things, I like to express how I feel and how first I have to address the issue. What's the problem? I'll go to the higher ups here in the Cs. We have a hierarchy. We have a chain of command. So I'll go to my C1, then my C1 goes to my C2, and that goes up to the consup and then the district director. But we just address our concerns. We kind of talk about it, and then we kind of just take it up the chain of command and see what we can do. But I feel like it's part of my job to kind of point out issues and what we can fix to make this better. There's always room for improvement.
Yeah. Well, and Conservation Corps is that unique organization with that hierarchy. Do you see yourself, in roles potentially, higher up in that hierarchy at some point?
I would really like to. I would like to work alongside the Jedi that we have, which is Christina Ordenza. The Jedi, it's an acronym actually for justice, equality, diversity and inclusive.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's something I'd really like to work towards. I know it's very environmental justice based. Yeah, she's kind of a role model to me. One day we can
That's
probably.
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, so much about our career development is finding those really strong role models and mentors, right? And then building relationships. We're really excited in our agency. We just put out a call. We have 26 departments in our agency, and we put out a call for as many as want to invite a Conservation Corps member to be an intern focused on those JEDI issues and other issues as well. Because we recognize you guys bring such incredible perspective that we need more of in our decision making. Ben, how about you? You're in a different organization, Environment California, I think pretty grassroots, right? Probably pretty flat, but what's been your experience as just recently graduated from college, and any pro tips for others out there that want to, get into this kind of work?
Yeah, so for anyone interested in getting involved in the space, I think a big piece sort of answering the last question of like navigating a space where people are older than you, I think approaching a new environment and a new field with just a level of humility and openness to growth and learning. One big tip that I took away from sort of entering the career field is it's completely okay to not know exactly what your issue area is or what it is you want to do. Being a young person, it's about figuring that out and sort of learning and finding what you are passionate about and can see yourself doing for a long time. Would recommend to anyone to try everything. Figuring out what you don't like doing is just as important as figuring out what you love doing. So when you see opportunities or you interact with someone who you see doing a job or in a field that you see yourself doing, don't be afraid to put yourself out there, ask for an informational call or get their contact information. So really just making sure that you're building the confidence and taking the steps to learn more about yourself and also learn more about the spaces you're hoping to enter. I think that's the best advice that I got in still learning as I navigate the space. So just continue to approach the space with open arms, and you'll often be met with a lot of open doors in return.
Such good advice from my view, Ben. And I mean, really, all of you as leaders have stepped up and been proactive. And I'm interested in, I think Sabrina, you found, the opportunity with the Corps on a job site, and then Ashley was Googling, for different opportunities. But just interested, so to build on what Ben said, I mean, what would you say to other young people who are watching today, or even, who might be part of families of parents watching today? What would you say to encourage them to take the first step to become environmental leaders in all of these different ways? If you're talking to a kid that maybe not that confident, or a young person not that confident, what advice would you give them?
I think I would just say that you should seize opportunities whenever they arise. So I know it might seem like some opportunities at school are purely academic, or maybe you don't have the best grades, or I'm not in all of the hard classes. So therefore, I shouldn't be this person who's involved in my community, because only people who are involved can be like scholarly as well and do this for college. And I would say that that's completely false. You can be someone who's really involved and passionate, and it doesn't necessarily have to be tied to your grades or your schoolwork.
Yeah, it's a really good point. So you don't need some sort of resume as a 16-year-old to actually get involved in the work, right? It's based on someone's interest. Sydney, Ruben, Sabrina, what would you say to folks that might not be doing this kind of work yet, but interested in it?
Yeah.
Sorry. All right, something that I would tell that young person is do something that you love, do something that you're passionate about. If that is meant for you, then go for it.
I love that. Sydney?
Yeah, I would just encourage people to start, which sounds, I don't know, it sounds more easier or harder than it actually is. Because even if you don't think you have the experience or the knowledge about, the climate crisis or what you can do, you'll be able to learn that. And no one's going to expect you to be fully knowledgeable on anything when you're just starting out, or even if you've been involved in this work for a while. Everyone's constantly learning, and there are more like usually so many people that are willing to kind of help you figure out what you want to be doing within the climate movement, and like what fits best for your interests and all of that. So just entering the spaces that you find interesting, even if it's a little bit nerve-wracking or you feel like you don't know a lot, is really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll tell you this, which is, I think when young leaders, whether you're in high school or college or post-college, put yourselves out there. I think there are a lot of people that will, are impressed and want to bring in leaders and work with them. Ben's point is coming there with, humility and curiosity, but also ambition. You all belong in these spaces, and it sounds a little trite, but you are our future. You will be sitting in jobs like the one I have here before you know it. And so I think, the more that others can follow your lead and stepping up in your own way, to Ruben's point, doing what you love, and getting in there. And to Ben's point, nobody's got a grand plan in terms of exactly what they want to do for their career. And if they do, I would guarantee it's going to change somewhat. So getting in there and mixing it up and lifting your voice, really, really inspiring. As we come to the end of our conversation, I want to share a comment from Annie, who's joining, one of the many folks that's joining here today. And she says, I just want to express my huge, sincere thank you to these Californians who are working so hard to make a difference for the world. I can tell you the last hour has been inspiring for us. And, on behalf of everyone who's tuned in, I want to thank you guys for what you're doing in your communities, but in the state, but also just broadly. And let you know that our agency, working for Governor Newsom, leaders in Sacramento and California, want to be allies and want to continue to empower you to drive the change we know we need to see. So we are concluding our discussion. If we can, we'll give a virtual clap of the hands to everybody that joined us here today. This session is being recorded and will be available on our resources.ca.gov website. And it's a great opportunity to share the discussion if you found it moving and helpful. Once again, everyone, happy Earth Week. Big thanks, young leaders, for all that you do. And for those who are in Sacramento, we hope to see you later this week at our open house tomorrow or the screening on Friday. And really, wherever you come from, for all who have tuned in, thanks for all you do. And we'll see you again soon. All right, take care. And I should mention, there is an email for those of you who have suggestions on future topics. Once again, thanks everybody, and have a great day and have a great week. Happy Earth Week.